Hello, and welcome to Reimagining Love. I'm Dr. Alexandra Solomon. I have been studying relationships for over 20 years as a couples therapist, a professor, an award-winning author, and as a wife, mother, daughter, sister, and friend. Now, I'm inviting you into this space each week as I dig into some of the toughest and most fascinating relational dilemmas of our time. If you want to discover how to create vibrant and loving relationships in your own life, you have come to the right place. This is Reimagining Love. Hi there. Welcome back to Reimagining Love. Okay, so we know that our collective conversation about relationships ends up having a profound effect on how we actually show up in our relationships. For example, a lot of the discourse on the shoulds of dating leads us to have rigid expectations, and we end up villainizing, quote unquote, bad dates. Also, a lot of the discourse on the shoulds of being in a relationship leads people to pursue relationships from a place of fear, motivated by something like, I don't want to end up alone. So today, our conversation takes these cultural notions and turns them on their head with a whole lot of optimism and self-check-ins. Our guest is Case Kenny, who today is releasing his latest book, The Opposite of Settling: How to Get Everything You Want Out of Love and Life Without Losing Your Spark. Case Kenny is an author, a creator, and a mindfulness expert. And since 2014, he's been writing, speaking, and teaching the practical ways to cultivate self-awareness, build confidence, and quiet the overthinking mind. His podcast, New Mindset, Who Dis, has resonated with millions of listeners, and his viral red pen writing on Instagram reaches hundreds of millions more. Through his best-selling journals, his debut book called That's Bold of You, and his live workshops around the world, he empowers people to challenge self-doubt through actionable mindfulness practices and to trust that the best is yet to come. So today, Case and I speak about his gripe with the term settling down and why he challenges us to settle up instead. We talk about the power of playfulness and co-creating humor with your person. We talk about why of dating matters and how to reframe your dating memories with the peak end theory in mind. Case also invites us to show up wholeheartedly in our relationships from the get-go with trust as the default. Loving bravely, you know I'm all about it. I appreciate the practicality and the optimism of our conversation. I know you're going to love it too. Enjoy. Case, it's so good to have you here with me today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So I want to start right off by asking you the question that I ask all of the guests on Reimagining Love. Are you ready for me to hit you with the question?
Yes, hit me.
Case, how are you reimagining love in one of your important relationships these days?
Yeah, I think I've learned a lot over the past decade from, being rather single in my 20s to having found my person in my early 30s. And I, so much so that I've learned that I, wrote an entire book about it. But, I think for me, reimagining love has come down to a very simple idea, which I think we all had initially. Then we kind of lose it in adulthood just based on the complexities of self and relationships is, the fact that the right relationship should help you become more of yourself. And in order for that to be true, you have to know yourself, right? Of course. And you have to be able to look at a relationship through the lens of, does this limit me or does this help me be more of myself? Does it expand or does it restrict? Does it amplify or does it threaten? And for me, I have realized firmly so, of course, that a relationship should make you feel more like your most free and joyful and independent as well self. And for me, this lens to look at love has been really powerful. It's given me a lot of hope. It's something I share a lot. So I'd say, yeah, that's the simple answer. Reimagining it for me is love should expand you and expand your world. And that's the whole point. And I think sometimes we lose sight of that, but I want to help people return to this.
Mm. The journey you've been on the last 10 years from being a single guy to being a partner guy really maps the journey of this book. You really are, you're living into your work in this chapter that you were on your own self-discovery journey, and now you've got it tied to what you're able to create in this partnership.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I wrote a book in 2020 called Single is Your Superpower. And, I still stand by that. I think being single is the time so that you can know yourself, so that you could figure out whether or not someone is amplifying that sense of self. So, like, yeah, my writing tends to mirror where I am in life. And now with my partner, I've just realized, like, for instance, in my 20s, being maybe a typical guy or just, someone who's still learning about himself in life, the idea of a relationship seemed very at odds with what was most important to me, which was my independence. And that manifested in a lot of different ways, as it does with many different people. But I've realized now, and it's chapter 1 of the book, that the right relationship should enhance your independence. It should make you feel more independent, if anything, because you have this person where you have such a strong connection that you're willing to do things outside of it because independence is not a threat to it. I refer to something called the dependency paradox, which is just the observation in child rearing and adolescence, that the closer the relationship between a child and a caregiver, the more willing the child is to take a step outside of them, to do something outside of their purview, because they know they have the strength of that relationship. And I always thought that that was, an interesting, and it makes sense kind of thing. But I was like, shouldn't it be the same in a relationship in your adulthood? And I think it flies a little bit in the face of social media, perhaps, or just like these weird social expectations we have nowadays where people are like, oh, he wants to do something outside of you, or she, did this outside of you. Something's wrong with the relationship. And for me, I think that's not the right lens to look at it. The right partnership should amplify that sense because you have the strength and the underpinning of the relationship. So yeah, that was one way I've certainly come to reimagine and grow. And it was kind of the starting point for the book as well.
Mm. I really like the parallel that you're making between the world of child attachment theory and adult attachment, right? And that's what we know about childhood attachment, is that the caregiver bond is like that secure base. It's a secure base from which children go and explore and then return home. And it's in the exploring that children like feel into their power. They feel who they are, but they're only able to explore because they know they can come home. And all of that science then shows that in adulthood, the adult intimate partnership bond really pretty much replicates that primary attachment bond. And so, of course, that idea of like creating a secure base with a partner so that you can explore and have adventures and then come back together and report on the adventures and feel enhanced in who you are.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I mean, I wrote the book, and it's my whole thesis on relationships is like, I actually wrote it and, talk a lot about it in reaction to the phrase settle down. Like, it's built into our culture, right? When are you going to settle down? Or I want to settle down, right? It's not a bad phrase. But to me, it's always had this weird energy to it that I was like, that seems like a bad selling point for a relationship. It's got the word down in it. And yeah, of course, I understand that to settle down has practical connotations that are great, right? It means you're not dating around. It means you've got commitment. It means you've got the simplicity of commitment, which I think is a huge selling point. But other than that, I was like, I really don't like that phrase. I think the right relationship is about more. It's about, to our conversation just now, amplifying your independence. It's also about getting more out of life. It's about being more ambitious. It's about being weirder. It's about being funnier. It's about doing all the things that bring you joy, but with a partner. So the whole phrase down always, I was like, that's a bad sales pitch. If you're trying to pitch me a relationship, I don't like that. So I literally, that was like, I wrote in reaction to that. And, I was like, well, the opposite of settling down would probably be settling up. So I call it settling up, which is just the energetic opposite of that, to help people come back to the idea that a relationship, and it's a great lens to look at a relationship, because then it helps you break down into some of the little things that are very important, the way you communicate, the way you feel, all these different things. But it's like, it should be amplification. It should not be this restrictive thing. And I think in this day and age, just, with all the dating horror stories and the, very human struggles that we have, it seems that relationships, at least on the surface, have become this limiting thing. And I think maybe returning to the original purpose, just the present purpose, but we've lost sight of it, as the sense of settling up and more and amplification, will give some people some hope. So that was the idea. But yeah, it started with that phrase, settle down. I was like, I don't think that's the right phrase.
I think it's brilliant. Yeah, I think it's brilliant because I love the idea of settling up. And I have, we're about to enter, my husband and I are about to enter our 27th year of our marriage. And
Wow.
I'm super clear that I'm settling up, like that there's so much in my life that is possible because of this partnership and also just more fun. Like there's, like to your point about the weirdness, like there's some stuff that we could never tell anybody about, just the weird things that we say and
Yeah.
do. There's just a kind of humor that you get to have in a relationship where it's safe enough to be weird. I
Yeah.
love that. I love that.
Well,
Yeah.
thanks for sharing that. I love hearing that as well. Cause I mean, that was my whole thing. Like, I did get a lot of inspiration from like childhood dynamics, like both from the dependency idea, from the idea of parallel play, and carrying that into adulthood where it's like, yes, as adults, things are more serious, but like, why are we so serious? For like, the point is playfulness. Like, I reference a lot of like the research that I know you're familiar with the Gottmans and emotional bids for connections, and like, how do we actually relate to people? And a lot of the book is, we relate through shared humor, shared weirdness, shared playfulness. Things that it makes me so sad to think that people might be in a relationship or pursuing a relationship where that isn't the foundation, the very thing that defines our existence, playfulness, and that we've lost sight of that because, for so many variety of reasons, but to look at that as the lens through which, can I be weird and playful and humorous? Does this person empower me to be this way? I think is a good, refreshing, perhaps, lens to look at a relationship instead of through some of the lenses that we're currently looking.
One of my, when I've been a couple therapist for like going on 30 years now. And a lot of times when I'm feeling stuck with my couples, one of the things I'm doing is like really talking about, okay, so what are you doing for fun? Because there's a level at which until and unless your nervous systems feel a measure of safety with each other, our work here in couple therapy is futile. I think what couples think when they're in pain is we've got to dig into the pain and do more talking and more deep conversations. And that is certainly a part of it, but there's this other entire portal, which is play and ease, that feels paradoxical when you're hurting, but it's essential, right? Because that's the stuff like because at the end of the day, we're just all fancy mammals. And so if we can't feel safe and comfortable and at ease and relaxed with each other, there's no amount of deep conversation that's going to create that. That's a felt like bottom up kind of a sense. And so you're spot on with the idea of bringing back playfulness.
Yeah, that's good to hear from you because I mean, yeah, I think it's like a cart and horse thing. Sometimes like we've left
Yes.
that behind, whereas like that should be the foundation, right?
It's also one of my favorite, you mentioned the Gottmans, one of my favorite pieces of Gottman's research to cite is they have this 2-day seminar, and day 1 of the seminar is all about conflict and repair. And day 2 of the seminar is all about, play and the good stuff. And so they did a study and they're like, what if half the couples only got the conflict day and half the couples only got the play day? And they were for sure that the couples who would do better were the ones who got the conflict day because they're couples therapists. And that's what we think we have to do is teach people how to do conflict better. But it turned out that the people who did better were the ones who had the play day, that they actually had more benefits to their marriage than the conflict ones.
I'm not surprised. I mean, that's great to hear. Yeah, I referenced some research in the book too that's talking about humor as an evolutionary tool for connection and satisfaction in a relationship. But it's like it's not just like do you laugh at each other's jokes? It's do you create humor together? Like do you bring your individual quirks and humor together and it sparks something new? Which I think is a beautiful thought as well.
Oh, I like that. Right. Because humor can be an individual thing. Like I find you funny, you find me funny. But you're saying that there's also something about relational humor, which is like that kind of back and forth, something that we're building together to make something even funnier between us. Has that been a part of your partnership?
Oh man, it's all we do.
Really?
I mean, I refer to us in the book. I mean, it's not so much like a first person written book, but I do reference our relationship just for anecdotal evidence. I refer to us as two silly gooses, which I know is like cringy, but like we really don't take that much serious, outside of like our commitment to each other. And I think, again, that's the point. And like we want to do life that way. That's another thing. Like my whole world is language, right? Emotional vocabulary, and then also just like how we express. And one of the other phrases, in addition to settle down, that I've got like beef with, is the phrase you hear a lot where people say, "I want to build a life with someone." And, it's a beautiful idea, of course. Like when you're with the right person, you are building a life, you're building a legacy, you're building a family, perhaps, like you're building generational wealth, sure. But like the idea of you need a partner to build your dream life really kind of makes me question then what are we doing in the meantime? Like, are we just twiddling our thumbs if we have to wait for a partner to build our dream life? And so, I talk in the book about the book, it's like, and this is just a very simplified phrase, but the idea is like you create your own joy, you build your own life, and then you do life with someone else. That is, you found someone who also knows what brings them joy. You both bring your ambitions together and you do it together. There's not this immense pressure on the relationship as the confines for the building of the dream life. It's the amplification of your sense of self that you've already put so much work into that, again, it's just one of those phrases you hear like, Bill, I want to build a life with you. And that's a beautiful, beautiful thing, of course. But it's like, what are you both bringing to the relationship that you've already put a lot of work into? How can we amplify that together and just do it together and do the thing together versus the pressure of the relationship is the thing that's going to bring you the joy in life?
Well, I really like the connection you're making between when we're using that phrase, building a life together. It's a real slippery slope then to you don't make me happy. You should make me happy, right? I can see how those two are really related, right? If the idea is that I'm building a life with you, my life with you, then it's very easy for me to offload my sense of happiness onto you and to sort of put my happiness at your feet and be like, what are you doing to make me happy? And certainly it is. Like, I think it is, the research shows it's really difficult to feel happy with your life overall if there's pain, disconnection, chronic, unremitting conflict in your intimate partnership. But that doesn't mean your partner is responsible to make you happy. I think it's so easy to miss, that's the heart of all my work on relational self-awareness, is looking at the ways in which we co-create these dynamics, that it's not my partner. I wish it was my partner's job to make me happy. Then I'd have no responsibility of myself, but it's not, right? It's like, what is my contribution? What am I bringing to the table? What's the energy that I'm bringing? How available am I to my partner's bids for me?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's such a needed dialogue because I'm all in favor of, holding your partner accountable and, making sure there's reciprocity and, all the beautiful things. But I feel like we're at this interesting time, especially with social media, where a lot of the focus, if not the majority of the focus, is them and they respect and all this beautiful stuff. But I feel like we've jumped over the conversation with ourselves about what we bring to the table, what we're holding ourselves accountable for. A lot of our internal language around why. Like I've got a couple chapters on, let's back up. Like, why am I dating? What is the purpose of love for me? Like, if we had to put some words like why and because behind the pursuit of this thing, what would we say? And I've just found over, I've been doing the pod for 7 years. I've been writing online for almost 15 about these subjects, is like, I find the majority of the time people don't have the best answers. And it's not like you expect people to have poetry for answers, but a lot of the times the answers, as simple as a question, is like, why do you want a partner? And people say something as like, well, I want to have kids, or I don't want to be alone, or that's just what you do, or I'm not getting any younger. Not bad people saying those things, but just like, we need to find some clarity. And we need to find clarity like for the purpose of like self-persuasion. Like I reference Ellen Langer's work in the book from her Xerox experiment around the idea of like how to persuade other people to do what you want. And you give them a reason. You say, well, I want to cut the line to make copies because, and then you give examples. And I always thought that was such an interesting psychological experiment about the power of persuading other people just with the word because. But it's like for ourselves, we don't always have that logic connected. And then we certainly don't always have it connected when it comes to like, I offer this thing and therefore in return, I'm looking for this level of reciprocity. I think we've lost that gap sometimes where we have a list of demands, but we don't have the standards for ourselves, or we have the thing that we want, but we aren't quite sure why we want it. So a lot of the book in my work is like I don't touch dating rules or like deep therapy things. It's not my space. But like for me, it's where's the motivation coming from? What is the level of gut honesty that it's coming from? And how can we use that as a lens to evaluate our pursuit of it or our presence within it?
Okay, so if the answers to the question, why are you dating, if the answers that you don't like are because I want kids, because I don't want to be alone, because it's just what you do. If those are the answers you don't like, what are the answers that you do like to the question of why are you dating?
Yeah. Well, I think it's a totally personal answer. So, I mean, if you're a really ambitious person, for instance, and that's a really important part of your life, I think a great answer would be around someone who understands the ambition and supports the ambition, or like some language around who supports me being XYZ true, valid, honest way. I think it's an entirely personal answer, but something around that I think is just a better answer, and it's just a lens through which to look versus, I think a lot of people are, not to lean too much into the land of cliche, but a lot of people are dating from fear, like some like scarcity mindset of not getting any younger, worrying that they're missing the shift, worrying that they're missing out on something. I think a lot of people are also dating from, practically speaking, are dating to be liked instead of dating to be seen. And that's the language I use in the sense of like people get smitten by attention and compliments and dating expectations and these things where, if you're not careful, you end up in a relationship just because they were nice to you and they liked you. But do they see you? Again, the whole idea of, are they amplifying? Are they making you feel like your truest self? Like that's the lens. And I think it starts with why. Why are you dating in the first place? So I think, all the things are interconnected, certainly.
One of the things I do is I teach an undergrad class at Northwestern called Marriage 101. And we talk about marriage, but really we talk about self-development, relational self-awareness, how we bring our family patterns into our intimate partnerships. And when I do my class on dating, I'll send out a survey before and find out how many of you are on dating apps and which dating apps and why are you using them. And, because I always find it, just my Gen X brain gets a little bit confused about like you're on a campus where you literally, it's a full saturation of your peers, right? Like, why do you need a dating app? And for many of them, it feels like a normative developmental process. Like this is what you do. It's part of adulting. And there's a subset of students who will, and I really appreciate them like surfacing this. They'll say it. It's a way for me to feel affirmed. It's a little bit of a test of my attractiveness, my desirability. And I think that there's something about like how kind of concretized dating has become with apps where I imagine, I've never been on a dating app, but I imagine that is what it feels, the whole thing feels like a test of how attractive am I, or kind of like, I'm going to sit here behind my clipboard and assess you. It either feels like I'm under the spotlight and I'm being kind of picked apart, or as a defense against the vulnerability of that, I'm going to put you under the spotlight and pick you
Right.
apart.
Huh. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot there that you could pick apart. Yeah. I mean, I think in my experience, I found that people turn to dating apps because it's a social thing. People would be lying if they said it wasn't a validating thing. I think there's also a sense of control there that maybe people can feel that they don't get in the real world. I did an interview the other day to a news outlet about, just in-person interaction. Like, I don't know, not to get into like gender expectations, but like women are increasingly saying that like men don't approach in public. So there's just this void of interaction and ability to meet people. So yeah, I think there's a lot there. I mean, I met my girlfriend on a dating app 4 years ago. So I think there's great use cases, of course, as well as there's bad ones. So it's about finding yours.
That's right. It's about the how, right? It's about the how. How are you using it? And the checking in with self, and to tend to, if there is a part, my gosh, there's parts of me that are looking for external validation all the damn time, not in a dating app, but in a million other forums. So just to know that there's that part of you that is seeking external validation on this app, and to tend to that part and try and not have that part in the driver's seat, and to know instead, right, I'm using this app to get to a first date so that I can see what can this other person and I co-create together.
Yeah. We have this like almost like epidemic of sorts that I see. I see it around the idea of like whoever cares first loses, or like care less and protect yourself more. And I only match what I'm given, this whole idea. And obviously, I'm sure you've got so much great perspective on it of talking to people who have been hurt. And that's their recourse, right? Because that's how you protect yourself from being hurt again, is you match, you wait and you see, and then you give. A smart strategy, perhaps. I just see a lot of people, especially within the context of dating apps, and the way that so many people are just waiting for other people to give them what they want. And, it's a tough subject because I also agree with that. But I'm a big proponent of like showing up, giving all the love you've got, all the energy you've got, all the effort you've got right off the bat. And for two purposes. One, I think one of the existential purposes of life is to give love, even if it's not received. There's such a purpose in giving love. That's one. Two, though, practically speaking, is the harder you try, the more love you give in the beginning, the quicker you get information back. It gives you a lens to look at, are they capable of being at this level or not? So all these people that are running around being like, all right, you do your thing, I'm going to sit here and watch, you're wasting your time and you're getting further into the muck. And I just, I wish I could I'm 37, not, I'm still in the meat of the curve, but I wish I could talk to like my 24-year-old self or a 24-year-old woman who is like doing these things and just be like, no, just like get information quicker for yourself, accelerate the process of clarity for you. Don't wait for them to give you clarity, collect clarity on your own. Be the person who shows up and loves. I mean, we're not talking about chasing. We're not talking about being naive and, getting stepped over, but to show up and just love and be enthusiastic and see what happens. And anyway, so you probably agree in some sense, but.
Oh, I totally agree. And here's what I'm thinking about. I'm thinking about the analog for me is like before I go on stage to give a talk, I have this image that I always use. And it's like, I get rooted. Like I imagine like my feet like tied, deep, deep in the earth. So I'm like really anchored. I imagine my heart chakra like open, like a big open beam of light, like holding the entire audience with this like big loving energy. Then I imagine like white light coming down into me, like just filling me up. And like, that's the image I was just having as you were talking about that, like showing up for a first date, like I'm going to like really like beam out so much love, not to get this person, but just because like, that's how I show up in life. Like I'm going to strive to be the biggest, warmest energy in the room just because that's what I'm going to welcome back. And then, right, to your point, if that other person isn't interested or available to meet that or match that, you are sifting through. So there's a way I think you can give love from a really rooted place. It's not desperate. It's not chasey. It's rooted. It's anchored. It's just you showing up as you show up for your life, in your life.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love the visual too. Yeah, I mean, what a purpose. Like that's like one of the purposes is to give without expecting in return and hope that it's returned. That's an amazing thing. But I really do think, again, back around the subject of like all these expectations around what is to be received, which is great. We need clarity on that. But I still am very grounded in the idea of, we have something special to give the world. And it's our job, our duty as humans to give. I reference James Hillman's work, The Soul's Code, his book in my book, and which basically the idea that like each one of us have this thing within us. He refers to it as an acorn. Like we all have this acorn within us, and you need to plant it and let it grow. And as much as we can try and hope that we can plant an acorn and hope that it blooms into a banana tree, an acorn is meant to be an oak tree. Like we have this thing within us. We have these qualities within us that are meant to be honored and nurtured. And we could try to ignore it and we could, get really lost in our lives. But eventually we will come back to the clarity of the need to let that thing shine. Right. And I'm talking about healthy qualities. I'm not talking about ones that, addiction or, things like that. And I just, again, the idea of the self of what is that about you that you need to honor. And that the expectation then would, through the lens of, does this person make me feel like more of myself? Do they honor it and do they amplify it? And I think sometimes, we have something special to give, whether that's attention or love or curiosity. And I think our ability to appreciate that. And I think one of the biggest things that I'm sure you see in your work too is just like how quick people are nowadays to villainize. Like you could go on 3 dates with someone and have a good time. And then suddenly, it turns sour. And yes, they are at fault for lying to you or ghosting you or whatever ended the thing. Can you look at those 2 dates and be like, that was a good memory. I appreciate that memory without needing to chuck the whole experience in the dumpster. Like, and it's human nature combined with social media sharing of bad dates and our desire to have winners and losers and men and women that we love these categories. But I think, and I forget who the philosopher is, but his quote was like, cheerfulness is the most certain sign of wisdom. Cheerfulness in the sense of being able to look back at the past and having a good memory despite how it ended. To me, I think that is just true wisdom and it keeps you hopeful. If you're only rating an experience based on the outcome, you are going to be filled with angst because there's so many things that are going to go south in life. We have to be able to appreciate the good memories, honor the end so that we don't necessarily repeat it in a negative way. But to me, that's like what I try to encourage people to be able to do. Take from it the wisdom they need, but also appreciate the memory.
I really like what I'm hearing in that as you describe it, is I'm really hearing that it's a deep unfairness to oneself. It actually isn't even about what the other person deserves. It's not like, oh, I shouldn't throw them under the bus. It really is about honoring the self, because you're right. If every dating experience that ends, that doesn't become your happily ever after person, if everyone that ends was a failure or a nightmare, it just hardens you, right? It makes the world feel much scarier. How do you possibly go out and try again if every ending was awful and painful and took something away from you? So it's a tricky line to walk, right? How do you, because it means being real about the hurt and the disappointment, but somehow not letting that harden into a cynicism or a victim stance or a martyr stance. So I think that I don't think you're saying it's easy, but I think you're saying it's possible. And there's something about, yeah, an overall, what's the quote? Cheerfulness is the surest sign of wisdom.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and I agree. Very, very not easy. I talk in the book, there's something called the peak end theory, which is just the observation psychologically that when it comes to memories, we tend to either remember them by their peak or their end. And, it could go a couple of different ways. We remember the relationship by the end and the way it ended in a horrible way, and that erodes our worth and it makes us try to predict the future based on the ending. We could also remember the middle in the good sense, in the way that I'm talking about. But then we beat ourselves up and say, I lost that. What an idiot. How could I have lost that? We had something so good together and now I don't. And then we beat ourselves up that way. So it takes a lot of ego death and humility to be able to pick through the wreckage. And we're not trying to control our emotion around what happened, but to be able to honor certain things and say, that was a good human experience. The ending wasn't. Here's what I'm taking from it. I'm wiping the slate clean and I'm moving forward without villainization, and I'm moving forward without trying to put people into buckets. It could take a lifetime to do that with particularly traumatic experiences, of course, and I would never touch that. But for the most part, at least in terms of nostalgia and in terms of villainizing, to pause and say, where is this emotion coming from? Is it coming from the peak? Is it coming from the end? Just trying to navigate the memory the best we can, I think could really benefit us.
Well, and to quote the title of your podcast, New Mindset, Who Dis? It's like you're inviting a mindset shift. You're saying, listen, your brain has a tendency to do one of two things. Tell a story about the entire relationship based on the peak or the ending. So that's not a you thing, that's a collectively our brain thing. So once you know that about your brain's tendency, then you can go, aha, I'm doing that thing again. All right. What's the rest of the story? What's being left out of this story? What's a more nuanced story that I can tell about the way that I tried and the way that they tried and the way that, it just didn't work out the way that maybe either of us wanted it to, but we sure did. I sure did learn A, B, and C from this person. And I sure did have these experiences with that person. So it opens you, right? Once you recognize, oh, my brain's doing that thing again, then we can make that mindset shift and create a different story.
Most of my work is around, okay, so we're able to do that. What does that offer us? Well, I think it offers us one thing, and that offers us like trust in the future, such that we don't take every bad experience and project it onto future experiences. Like, I read this study that had nothing to do with relationships, but it was basically this idea in the workforce, the power of making trust your default. That's trust in other people, that's trust in yourself, that's trust in the industry, that's trust in the economy, whatever it may be. These researchers basically followed these working class people in corporate white collar jobs for like 30 years, and they divided them into two groups. One group was the like dog eat dog group. Like, yeah, you've got to look out for yourself. It's you against everyone else. You got to stab some people in the back to be successful. Then there was the group that said, trust is my default. Yeah. If Hank from accounts receivable says he's going to do what he's going to do, I trust him. We could all succeed. We can all get promoted. And overwhelmingly so over like, I forget what it was, like 2 or 3 or 4 decades, the people who had trust as their default made significantly more money, were promoted more often, and in general showed a higher emotional positivity. And I just always thought that was an interesting anecdote, that if that's true in working and corporate life, why wouldn't that be true in your personal and interpersonal relationships? The idea of making trust your default. And that's a whole conversation, that topic of trust, like the most vulnerable thing you could do, but at least trust that the way something ended doesn't dictate the beginning of something else with someone else. And I think we're very resistant to that idea, of course, especially if we're caught in a cycle of bad and bad and bad. I understand. But to try to return to a place of trust as a default in ourselves, and not doing the thing where it's, I have horrible taste in men, I always choose the wrong woman, horribly limiting mindsets. And then also the idea of past partner does not equal future partner. Trust as your default, I think, is a really powerful mindset.
To go back to the thesis of your book, that is then a settling up relationship would be in the beginning then for me to be able to talk to a partner about, like, listen, here's some of the stuff that I'm bringing into this relationship, and I'm on my own healing journey. I'm doing my work. I'm checking with myself. I've been hurt, and there's a part of me that wants to close. There's a part of me that wants to make you promise me that you'll never, ever, ever hurt me, but I'm doing my work, And so then if I can talk to you about that, and if we, I can be aware that that part of me may creep up from time to time, then I am able to become more my whole self in the context of our relationship, because I'm just being real about it. I neither have to hide that part of me from you, nor do I have to make you responsible for fixing that part of me.
Yeah. Oh, beautiful. Yeah. Well said. Exactly.
Okay, when you talk about when you are helping us reimagine settling down and you're helping us create this vision of settling up, are you also talking about settling? Because I feel like this is one of these words that I hear a lot from my students and therapy clients and podcast listeners, is like, I'm afraid I'm settling. The idea of settling in a relationship. Is that something that you get into in this new book of yours?
Yeah, of course. I mean, that's also the basis of the book. The opposite of settling is the opposite of settling down, but also the opposite of receiving less than you deserve. And I really try to stay away from telling people what they deserve, because that's where I think we get in trouble nowadays, especially because there's a huge difference between standards and expectations. And I think we've really blurred the line such that expectations have become our standard. Expectations being cultural, social, and other people's needs in our relationships, which we're all different. Surely I don't need the same thing that you do. There might be some base ones, but we're very different. So I think where we get lost in saying settling means this for me and settling means this for you is, like, a lot of times I just find that people are operating from expectations. Oh, social norms. Like, did he pull out your chair at dinner? Like, did he order you a black card? Did he take you on a coffee first date? Or did he take you to a Michelin restaurant? Like, expectations that really I don't think should ever define whether you're settling or not. Settling, of course, at the most basic level, should be within the lens of reciprocity. Here are the things that I'm offering. What is their enthusiasm for returning it, or variations of it, or the thing that shows that interconnected, energetic, communicative exchange of value and attention and enthusiasm. That's up for someone else to define. I have found that when you date to be liked instead of date to be seen, when you date from expectations instead of personal standards, that's how you end up settling. And those are all personal things. So I almost leave it there. But the final chapter of the book is about how you should date from no expectations, but high standards. Not low expectations, because that would be a weird thing, but just no expectations for you to be able to go into a date, into early dating, without the idea of a type, without the idea of how it should go, without the idea of how fast it should go. I think that's how we really give ourselves the clarity we need to avoid any semblance of whatever settling looks like to you.
I really, really appreciate you tying this whole conversation about expectations to cultural stuff. I was once giving a workshop to, I don't know, a couple hundred therapists, and I referenced something about dating. And so a room full of therapists, and I said something about how we as therapists need to be really careful when we're sitting with a client and the client is dating, and the client comes in and tells us a story about, if it's like, let's say a cis hetero female client talking about how he wanted to split the bill on the first date. And the therapist has an expectation or has a reaction, right? Because the therapist has also been socialized. And I was like, we as therapists need to really keep an eye out for the way in which gendered norms and cultural expectations creep into our therapy office then and shape how we have conversations with our clients about their dating lives. And when I tell you that the room erupted and it became this whole debate about, but of course a man should pay, but of course a man shouldn't pay. It's like, look, we in this room can't even get this right. It's so powerful. And the way that a pulling out the chair or did he order this car for me, the way that that becomes a cover for or a stand-in for, a proxy for what's my worth, how do you see me and respect me, that of course we're reaching for something that feels kind of concrete because those questions are so big and scary, but those questions can't be answered just simply by the act of a chair being pulled out. I think it's about something more than that, right? Like, how do I feel in this interaction?
Perhaps.
Oh, but it's,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay. So that's what you're helping us tease apart is
Yeah.
this, that part about know that your expectations have been socialized into you to some degree.
Socialized for sure. I mean, what a meaty topic, and I'm glad obviously you bring that up because therapists can really set the more people that are in therapy, which is amazing. Therapists can really set the scene for that. So I think that's amazing. I also think about the somewhat less socialized, but the more like internalized ego, perhaps, or insecurity, also perhaps of conversations around how you want to be loved. Like I talk a lot about like a conversation with a partner who's actively loving you. They're trying to love you. And you say to them, hey, I know you love me, but I don't feel loved by you. The ability to have that conversation, I think, is so essential because obviously in your work, you probably see it like people love from how they want to be loved. They loved in the way that their former partner wanted to be loved. And that's what we give initially to a partner. And we hope it works, but sometimes it doesn't. The ability of your partner on the receiving end to say, hey, like this makes me feel loved. The ability to have that conversation and not think that having that conversation means the relationship is dead, I think is such an healthy thing. For me, like the right partner for my girlfriend to say, hey, like Case, like I remember when I first started dating my girlfriend, I would always get her books because to me, that's a really personal gift. And like, it shows like, I see you at this level. And at a certain point, she was like, hey, like stop getting me books. I don't want any more books. And we had a conversation about like what really made her feel loved. And I think that was such a beautiful thing. Cause I think so many people nowadays are like, well, if I have to tell him, then it's not real. And then he's just doing it so that I am placated. Right. Like, and obviously there's grounds with nuance within that. But I think the ability to have communication, it's a crazy expectation to think that someone's going to love you perfectly right off the bat. Expectation wise, that's what we're talking about. To have that conversation, I think is a beautiful thing. It's a sign of maturity. It's a sign of connection that you're both willing to have the conversation without ego. He doesn't get defensive. She doesn't get defensive. He, she, whoever, they don't think it's an erosion of the relationship that you have to talk about it. That I think is also an expectation we need to break down as well. And I think it's a really important one, particularly the deeper you get into a relationship.
I totally agree. So one of the qualities of a settling up relationship is that we can bring each other that kind of feedback lovingly, gently, because ultimately what's embedded when your girlfriend said to you, Case, enough of the books, what she was saying is like, I love that you love me. I love that you are doing these things that reflect your love for me. Can we just tweak, can we just tweak the process a little bit here, right? Keep doing it. Keep bringing me the love. Yeah. And that was then just it was an invitation. It was an invitation for you.
Yes. And for me, who genuinely loved her, I'm like, amazing. Thank you. I want you to feel loved. So I receive it. And now I'm doing it, not because you told me to, but because I want you to feel it. So it's a great like lens to look at. How is it received? How is it given? I think it's a beautiful thing to have. I have a chapter in a book where I refer to it as like being a bad boy or bad girl in the sense of being willing to be the quote, as we perceive it, the bad person in a conversation, the person willing to approach the difficult conversation, like essential and something that I think we really stray away from because of this weird expectation around it.
Right. Until we break down that you should be able to read my mind, then what happens is people don't speak up and then they don't speak up. And then by the time they do speak up, it's that unbridled self-expression. And it's not shared in a way that your partner can receive because you've been sitting on it for so long. And it's like kind of hardened into this like resentment that comes out in a way that just evokes your partner's defensiveness. And then you say, see, I can't tell my partner anything, they get defensive. But then you have to also look at, but how did you bring it
Exactly.
up?
Yeah. Resentment is the word that I would circle certainly there. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Case, this is so fun to connect with you like this. I really like I love the optimism of your work and the practicality of your work. I think this has been
Thank
a
you.
really fun conversation. Anything that we didn't get to that you feel like you really want and need people to understand about your fantastic new book, which is called The Opposite of Settling: How to Get Everything You Want Out of Love and Life Without Losing Your Spark. Anything we didn't get to in this conversation?
No, I think we nailed it. Thank you for all the great questions. I mean, I think at the end of the day, the book is about optimism in the sense of
Mm-hmm.
believing that things can change. That if you're not where you want to be in your love life or in your personal life, things can change based upon the way that we speak to ourselves, based on the way that we look at our memories and make sense of the past and set to the future. And I think it's a beautiful thing. I think a lot of us need a reset right now. We don't necessarily need more rules or blueprints for finding. I think we need a return to ourselves and just a little bit more hope in our eyes to look forward for friends and people and just the people in our lives. So I wrote it from that perspective, and I hope people pick it up.
That's great. If people are new, I'm sure lots of Reimagining Love listeners already know and love your work. But for folks who are new to Case Kenny, where should people? We've got links in the show notes, obviously, for the new book. Anything else you want to make sure people know about how they can connect with you and learn more from you?
I appreciate that. Case Kenny on Instagram if you want some red pen quotes. I also have a podcast called New Mindset Who Dis, little 15 to 20 minute solo hosted episodes on these topics. And the book, of course, casekenny.com. But thank you so much.
Thank you, Case, for sharing your wise and practical perspective on dating and relationships. I hope this conversation inspires you to move forward with more intentionality, more expansiveness, to walk away from each date and each relationship experience with more positivity and appreciation. And certainly for you to fill your life with all the things and the people that honor and amplify your sense of self. To learn more about Case Kenny, including where to buy his new book, The Opposite of Settling: How to Get Everything You Want Out of Love and Life Without Losing Your Spark, which is hot off the presses, check out the links in our show notes. Until next time, be well. Do you have a relationship question that you want answered on the show? Visit reimagininglove.com to send in a written or audio question. Questions can be about intimate partnerships, family relationships, friendships, you name it. If you're looking for more love and relationship content, you can find me on Instagram at dr.alexandra.solomon or visit my website, dralexandrasolomon.com, where you'll find my blog as well as the Intimate Relationships 101 e-course based off of the popular class I teach at Northwestern University. Thank you for listening, and see you next week here on Reimagining Love.